Hello, Edward here from 088. In this session, we're going to be talking about patching and universe routing. That's what we're talking about today. So first of all, patching. What do we mean by patching? Patching, put simply, is just the process of configuring your console to be able to control your lights. Simple as that. So it's the process of telling the console what lights you have, how you want to control them, and also what address they're on. And we'll talk about addressing as we go through this session. So if you factory reset a console, you do a fresh install of software, you've just bought it fresh from the factory, whatever it may be, well, the console won't know, whilst it's in your box, it won't know what lights you might have and might want to control. And so we do need to go through a process of telling the console what lights we have. Now, on all ZerOS consoles, which is what we're talking about today, on all ZerOS consoles, there is a software feature called RigSync. RigSync software. Go check out some of our other videos that go into detail about RigSync. But basically, RigSync is this software that runs in the background of ZerOS consoles, and it can automatically discover, patch, and then keep your fixtures synchronized, actually saving you having to do this manual patching process. Worth mentioning, this RigSync software that I'm talking about, this is enabled by default on Flex S consoles. So on Flex S24, Flex S48, RigSync is enabled by default, but on all consoles it can be manually enabled as well. So you'll see behind me I have a Flex S24 there, and I've also got a Chauvet fixture. I've got a Chauvet Colorado fixture, and that is an RDM fixture. Now RDM stands for Remote Device Management, and as the name suggests, it means we can manage it remotely. We can configure it, we can manage it remotely. And that's what RigSync uses. So RigSync is using this RDM protocol to allow it to discover the fixtures that are in your rig and, as we'll see in a bit, allow you to automatically patch them into your console. RigSync uses RDM, and RDM will just sit on your usual DMX cabling. You don't need anything special cable, you don't need to run an extra cable to your lights. It will run over your standard 5-pin or 3-pin standard DMX XLR cabling. Okay, so there's nothing special about it, it's just ready to go. The only thing that's important is making sure that your fixtures are RDM enabled, because not all fixtures that can be controlled by DMX are RDM enabled. Okay, now in the case of the Chauvet fixture there, it is RDM enabled. So I have a DMX line coming from my console, this one here, the female connector, and I'm just going to plug it in, and this will then plug my Chauvet fixture into my console. What we can see here is I'm remoted in to my Flex S console, so I can see exactly what's on the on the screen. I can remote in and see what's on my console screen. So all I'm going to do is connect them together. I'm going to connect the fixture into my Flex S console, and let's take a look at what happens. They're plugged in, so I'm going to put that to one side, and you'll see there, without me doing anything, that fixture, the Colorado, there it is. It's now in my console. Simple as that. I can select it, I can go and home it to turn it on, and I've got control. I can jump to my colours and start to colour mix on that. And you'll notice there, I didn't get a pop-up saying I found a fixture. I didn't have to go in to the patch menu to do a discovery for any fixtures it might find. It just did it. RigSync will just constantly be looking out for any new fixtures. When it finds them, it adds them into your show file so you can control it, and that's really useful. Now, first thing we'll take a look at is once it's in your console, it's going to behave like a normal fixture. I can see in my faders window, there it is. It's been assigned to the first fader because it was a fresh console and I had no other fixtures in my console. if I just grab my DMX line again and I unplug it, I get a warning. So one of the benefits, one of the many benefits of just letting RigSync do the work to patch your console is it going to keep tabs on things. Not only is it going to add any new lights that it can discover, but as we can see here, it's going to notify you of any lights if they go offline. Now, of course, that could be because the light is physically turned off, or it could be because it loses data, as has happened here. And so I get a pop-up saying that your first fixture, which is the Colorado, that's the name of the light, is not responding. I can then go and dismiss that if I want to, but I will still get a little red cross. Hopefully you can see that, a little red cross next to that fixture, just to let you know, well, yes, you can still program it, of course. I can still go in now, I could go and change its colour, but your fixture's not going to be responding because it's not currently connected to your data line. If I go and reconnect, plug those in, we're then back in sync, and the console's now going to stay synchronized with that. So that is, as we can see, automatic patching, but we're starting to realise that RigSync's a bit more than that. It's also going to be notifying us of devices go offline. As I said, enabled by default on a Flex S. That's why from my factory reset Flex S there, I just plugged in my DMX line and there we go, we're patched. But on other consoles, so on full size Flex, on ZerOS server, you can go in and enable RigSync. So let's explore a little bit further about some of the other options we've got. So we found our fixture, we got notified if it went offline. Something that we can now start to dive into is configuring that fixture remotely. And the two key things is the DMX address and the mode that fixture's in. So what do we mean by address? Well, if you're not necessarily familiar with DMX, go and check out our dedicated DMX session. It's really great. It explains exactly what DMX is, what DMX addresses are. But as a simplistic overview, the DMX address is the unique ID, if you like, of that fixture. If you want to control fixtures individually, they need to be on different addresses. Okay, each fixture will use multiple DMX addresses for every function that light might have. There's a very brief overview on screen right now. This fixture has intensity, it has red, it has green, it has blue. Each one of these functions will have at least one DMX channel to be able to control it. So you can see my one fixture uses multiple channels, and the DMX address of that light will be the very first address of the first channel that light uses. Now, when the console discovered it, it found out what the fixture was, but it also found the address it was in, and it added the fixture into my console with that address. To go in detail and take a look at some of the patching options, we can go into Setup. So I'm going to go and press my Setup key, and we can see here, there we are, there's my fixture, and it's currently on address 201. That's the address the console discovered it in. That light, when it was last used, it was on DMX address 201. And so the console's just added it in, and has added it in as it found it. It hasn't changed it, it didn't need to. It just found it in that address and it just added it in. Now, if you had an existing fixture that you'd manually patched that was using DMX address 201, well, when the console found that Chauvet fixture, it would have just readdressed it. It would have readdressed it to something that isn't conflicting, and so it would have automatically readdressed that for you. But you can manually readdress a fixture. So to do that, you can click on either that individual fixture's address or select the fixture, as I've got here, and I can then go and click address at the top. And that allows me to edit the fixture's DMX address. Okay, so I could go and readdress that to address 1. That's readdressed it, as you can see. If I come out of Setup, go to my colour picker, I can still control that fixture. It's now on a different DMX address though. Something else we can do is change a fixture's mode. If I go to clicking on that fixture, I can see all of the available modes that that fixture has. So by modes we mean ways that that fixture can be controlled. Typically, most fixtures have multiple different ways you can actually control them, depending on whether you want more advanced modes, more simplistic modes, modes with other features, things like that. And we can see here that the available modes for this particular fixture. Again, when it discovered the fixture, it patched it into my console in whatever mode that fixture was currently set to. In this case here, it's the TR16 17 channel mode. But actually, if I decide, well, no, I want you in the TOR mode, the 12 channel, well, I can choose the mode I want and click OK. And that's now changed the mode remotely of my fixture. Again, come out of setup, select that light, I can go turn it on and start to control it again. But I'm now controlling it in the slightly different mode. Let's jump back into setup. And so that's our DMX address. We've talked about how we can actually change the mode remotely as well. Now, something else that you'll notice if you're looking at a fixture in here that has been discovered by RigSync, it's an RDM fixture that's been discovered by RigSync, you'll notice that in your address field here there's an extra button. There is an identify button. Part of the RDM protocol is you can tell a fixture, identify. Show me who you are. Show me which light you are in my rig. So if you imagine I've got, what, 12, 24 of those? All been discovered in, all been addressed. Well, to very easily work out which light is which, I can click on it in here and click identify. And that's going to send it, and that's going to tell it to start identifying. Now, in this case here, this fixture just flashes on briefly. On and off is what it does as its identify message. Some fixtures will move about, some fixtures will flash their display menus. It depends on the fixture. Check out your fixture's manual if you want to know what it will do when you send it an identify command. I can click that again to tell it to stop identifying. Maybe you've then found what fixture it is in your rig. You can then tell it to stop identifying. So that is RigSync. Patching the console automatically and allowing you to configure the fixtures. Now, it's worth bearing in mind as well, if I were to go and change the settings on that fixture, those changes would be reflected in the console. So it's not just the console sending changes to it, it can send changes back. And it doesn't matter. Either way round, they're still going to stay synchronized. And that's RigSync. And so you can see there's huge benefits. If you've got a load of RDM kit, just let RigSync do the work. Let it patch your rig for you. You don't have to worry about this stuff. If you don't have RDM kit, don't worry. We will be going into manually patching in a little bit. So all of the stuff you need to know if you don't have RDM fixtures and need to patch them manually, we will explore. So let's take a look at some of the RigSync settings that are available. There's not many. The nice thing about RigSync is it just does its thing. It cracks on with it. It does its thing. But there are some specific RDM settings available. They can be found within universes. If you see the word universes, you think the console's talking about space. Don't worry. We will explain actually what DMX universes are shortly. But universes is where your different protocols live. And as you can see in here, I have a remote device management RDM panel, RDM section in my universes window. And as you can see, it is currently enabled. We've been seeing that in action. But as well as that, we've got a few other options. So firstly, I could disable it if I wanted to. But then I've got a few other options. Discover all fixtures. So if you imagine you've gone and deleted an RDM fixture, so if right now I was to go to my fixture schedule and manually delete that fixture, well, of course, you delete it, RigSync would discover it and patch it back in. Well, we don't let RigSync patch a light back in that you've just manually deleted. That would be ridiculous. So you can delete it, it's then gone. RigSync will then ignore the fact it's still on your DMX line. But if you do need it again, go to Universes and do a discover all. Click that button, the console's going to do a fresh discovery for all of your fixtures in the rig. We then have a revert rig back button. That is really useful. Click that and the console will send your fixtures back to the settings that it discovered them in. Okay, so that's really useful. And then another option we got here is lock rig. Okay, and that's disabled by default. But if you enable lock rig, that means that I could now no longer change the settings on that fixture. If I went to the menu on the back, changed its address, it would very briefly change to what I set it to, the console would realise something's happened, and then tell it to go back to what it was. So with lock rig, your console is the only thing that will allow any settings to be changed on the devices, on your RDM connected devices. So that's quite a useful one to be aware of. It won't just lock things like mode and DMX address, but if you've got moving lights, it's also going to lock things like pan and tilt settings and things like that. So that is useful to be aware of. So as you can see, that is your RigSync settings. Just a few extra settings to be aware of here, and as I said, they can be found in the Universes section. So just a couple of kind of last things to mention when it comes to your RDM system, and that is, if you're using a DMX network, and by that we usually mean a daisy chain, just DMX out of your console into all of your fixtures, that's going to be absolutely fine. Just observe your normal DMX cabling rules. But if you're using splitters, just something you need to be aware of, you do need dedicated RDM enabled DMX splitters. If you just buy some bog standard DMX splitters, they're doing just that. They're only splitting the DMX signal. Whereas if you get some dedicated RDM DMX splitters, they're going to look the same, but they will also be allowing to let that RDM data transfer from each of the ports of the splitter to your console. So, for example, our splitter 8, 088 splitter 8, that is RDM enabled straight from the factory. So that will allow your RDM network to continue working. Great stuff. So that's all of the kind of RDM stuff I wanted to cover in this. Let's now dive and start to talk a little bit further about manually patching. So if you don't have RDM kit, or maybe you do have RDM kit, but you want to be the one that says what device gets what address, we're going to need to manually patch those fixtures. So to do that, I'm actually going to come out of my remote software. So I'm going to stop remoting into my Flex S, and instead let's work on Phantom ZerOS software. So Phantom ZerOS, that allows me to emulate any console running ZerOS. And in this case here, I'm going to be emulating the Flex console. Okay. So I'm going to make my external monitor window here a little bit bigger. And let's start to work through the process. So I've currently got some fixtures patched in. I've got an existing show file. Let's go in. I'm going to do clear options. I'm going to do reset desk. Yes. And I now have no fixtures in my show. So we can work through together and actually add those in. So first things first, if you've got a completely fresh console, you don't have RDM enabled lights, you're going to need to add your fixtures in manually to tell the console what lights you have. So let's tap setup and let's go to add fixtures. In add fixtures, this gives you access to the ZerOS fixture library. In here we've got over 20,000 different fixtures from hundreds of manufacturers. And so what you can do is you can go and find that fixture that you need to control. First column is your manufacturer. So you can go in and find the particular fixture that you're after. So I'm just going to go and find some clay packy. When we found the manufacturer, we can then choose the model of that fixture. This is all of the different fixtures that clay packy make that are in our library. And I'm going to go and choose the Aleda Wash K20. Before we mention about this last column, if the fixture you need is not in the library, don't worry, is the first point. You are still going to be able to control that light. But what you'll need to do is you'll need to obtain that fixture. Again, if it's an RDM enabled fixture, let the console take the strain, let the console do the work to find that fixture and manually patch it for you. Okay? If it isn't RDM enabled, then what you can do is, firstly, you can make the fixture file yourself. So there's a free software package that you can get from our website. You can download that onto your computer and create a fixture file yourself. Alternatively, drop us an email. Drop us an email and we can make the fixture file for you and then send it back to you to load in using the load button here. But over 20,000 fixtures, you should be okay. Most of the time you're going to find your fixtures you need in here. Certainly if they're from your big well-known fixture manufacturers. So when you found your fixture, you then have this last column, which is your mode. And by mode, that's what I mentioned earlier. It's the way that you want to control that fixture. So it's how you want to be able to control that fixture, whether you want to control it in a more simplistic mode, you've got less access to different features, or you want to run it in extended mode, and that will give you access to absolutely everything you can control about that fixture. In the brackets here, you can see how, depending on what mode you use, they do of course go up quite quickly in some cases in the number of channels that those different modes use. Okay, and you do have a maximum number of channels that you can use on your console. That's worth mentioning. So FlexS consoles, they come in either a 1 universe or a 2 universe variant. 1 universe equates to a 512 channels. So you can see here, wouldn't take many of these fixtures in the 131 channel mode to fill a universe. Wouldn't take many. Double that, if you get the 2 universe FlexS, that doubles to 1024, 512 times 2. So that gives you a little bit more headroom. Now on the full size Flex, which is what I'm emulating here, that starts at 4 universe. So the base model Flex, you have 4 universes of channels to play with that you can patch onto. So you can start to really see the difference between the FlexS consoles and also the full size Flex. Now the Flex is actually available all the way up to 16 universes. So that equates to just over 8,000 channels that you're able to patch. And so you can see there that you'll be able to get a lot more of these fixtures in on a 16 universe console than you would be able to on a little 1 universe FlexS 24. So it's just give you an idea really of why these channels matter. Now in this case here, I'm just going to patch them in standard mode. I'm going to keep things simple. Standard mode has all of the functions I need. How do I know what functions it has? Well, take a look at your fixtures manual. That's the best bet. That's going to give you the biggest overview of what each mode actually gives you in terms of capabilities. So when you found your manufacturer, your model and your mode, you can then go ahead and click Next. And we can then start to configure information. First of all, we can say how many of this particular light you have. You can patch multiple in one go. So I might want to go and say, well, actually, I've got 10 of these lights. And then you can say the first fixture number. Now, the fixture number, that is your user number, if you like. It's the number that you use to reference, to control that light. So on the FlexS 24, you can have a maximum of 48 fixtures. Therefore, your fixture number is going to be between 1 and 48. that doubles to 96 fixtures on the Flex S48. So again, that number would be between 1 and 96, and it's the physical fader number that you're using to control that light's intensity. Now on the Flex, and as you can see here on my screen, well, I don't really have that limit. The only limit you've got on the Flex is the number of DMX channels allocated to you. Those universe counts, as I mentioned, between 4 and 16. In terms of fixture numbers, you can number your fixtures anywhere between 1 and 9999. So you've got a lot of flexibility there. Now, it's very common, and obviously it's completely down to your preference if you're on the full size Flex, but it's very common to number, for example, dimmers starting at 1, LED fixtures starting at 101, moving light starting at 201. You know, there's loads of different ways you could lay that out. If you had, for example, max 700 moving lights, it might be a very good idea to number those 701 onwards. It's just a very quick reference. But as I said, on Flex, it can be, well, you've got a huge amount of numbers that you can configure that to be. Whereas on the Flex S consoles, well, you do need to obviously keep that in terms of the physical fader number that controls that light. Now, if you want to, I'm going to make this window a bit smaller, and I'm going to open my virtual front panel. Rather than actually filling in these fields manually, you could use your console's channel buttons. So if I go and click into here, I can actually click under the fader that I want to control that light, and I can add multiple lights in using the buttons. If I press and hold the first fixture button, I can add in a range of those fixtures all at once. So I've gone, I want 10 fixtures on these 10 faders. Job done. It's filled in both of those fields for me. Then we have our DMX address field. Okay, remember, this is the start address of the first fixture that we are patching. So whatever is set on its fixtures menu, it must match in here. It must also be in the right mode. So whatever mode I chose on my console, so I chose the standard mode, you must ensure that your fixture is also in standard mode. As we've mentioned already, if you have RigSync doing the work, you don't need to worry about that, because it will just make sure that the console is already in the right mode for you. So it's going to address them consecutively. It's not going to patch 10 fixtures all onto the same DMX address. That's not how DMX addressing would work. You can't have multiple fixtures all trying to control one DMX start address. It doesn't. That's not going to work. And you'll see that if I have one, well, you'll notice on the previous page, this was 20 channels. There we go. I can see the blue highlighted is 1 to 20. If I start to increase this, the next fixture is going to be starting at 21. So if I say a quantity of 2, it's now gone 1, it's gone 21, etc. So if I can do 10, it's just going to consecutively add those in for me. And as well as that, I then have a patch offset. So instead of just having the console adding these lights in one after the other, I can space them out. So if I do a patch offset of 30, rather than being addressed 1, 21, 41, we're now looking 1, 31, 61, etc. And you can see we've actually now got spaces in between these fixtures. Okay. And that's really common, because typically if you're not the one that's addressed your fixtures, if you're just the console operator, and you're taking your console to an already pre-addressed rig, it is very common to address fixtures with nice neat numbers all ending in a 1 or sometimes all ending in a 0. Depends what sequence you want. And so it just makes things much more manageable than if everything's one after the other, and if, you've got a 17 channel fixture, that's then 1, then 18, then it starts to get a bit complicated off the top of your head, unless you're a very good mathematician. So this system makes things easier, and the console allows you to take advantage of that. Now, you might be thinking, well, I'm doing that, but then wasting all of these addresses in between my fixtures? Well, not really. Because first of all, I could go and patch a fixture into that gap. If I've got a fixture that uses less channels than the gap, then I can fit fixtures in there. Or I can actually choose to patch onto other universes. Now, this is important to be aware of. I mentioned that, let's just use the 4 universe base flex as an example. I mentioned that it has, the base model flex, 4 universes of DMX that you can patch onto. That is 4 universes worth of DMX channels. 4 times 512, 2048. But you don't have to pack 4 universes to the brim. There's no need to do that. What you can do instead is actually spread your 4 universes of DMX across 64 desk universes. So my example here, well, if I'm not using these channels on universe 1, well, I'll just use them on a different universe. And you can do that. And the analogy I like to use, and if this confuses you further, I apologise, but I like to say it, well, if I've got a jug of water, and that is my 4 universes worth of DMX, I can pour those number of channels that I have available to me into 64 cups. I can just spread it across 64 cups. Yes, I'm not going to get 64 full cups because I've only got 4 universes worth of channels. But I can spread those channels across 64 universes. I don't have to fill the first 4 cups. Hope that makes sense. So even on a little 1 universe Flex S24, you can patch across 64 desk universes, so long as the total number of channels in use doesn't exceed the number of channels licensed for your console. Once you get your head around that, you realise how powerful that is. Now you might be thinking, okay, well this is all lovely and theoretical, but how on earth do I actually get Universe 10 to my Lite? Well, we'll talk about that. That's where the routing part of this session comes in, which we'll talk about in a bit. So, yep, I can choose to patch onto whatever universe I want between 1 and 64, so I could stick them on universe 10. If you're on the full-size Flex, a little useful shortcut to be aware of, if I were to do 2.1, that's saying universe 2, address number 1. Okay, so in that address field, if you're on a Flex, you can use the point to automatically populate the universe field for you. I'm going to keep things simple. Let's go back to 1.1 and let's get rid of our patch offset. So I'm putting the patch offset back to the channel count of the fixture, or no offset if you like. And there we go. I've told the console how many I've got, what fixture number I want to control it, and I've configured my DMX address settings. And now I've done that, I can click Finish. Worth mentioning, if you're on a Flex S, you will see the number pad field by default to allow you to type into all of these fields, but you can get to your universe preview just fine. You can also, if you want to, actually click in to this area to automatically adjust that DMX address field. So you can actually click into here to patch your block of fixtures. Any addresses already in use will be greyed out. You can't, as I already mentioned, you can't overlap already used addresses. And so when I've done that, I can go and click Finish. And that will patch all of those fixtures into my show. And we're back to this window that we saw earlier, and this is the fixture schedule. Big old spreadsheet really, showing you all of the fixtures that are currently in your show. So let's talk about this window a little bit. So first of all, running down the first column, you've got the channel number. That's the physical fixture number that you use to control that light. Remember, that's your user number. So In this case, it's fader 4, but also if you're using syntax on the full size flex, a 4 enter would select that light for you. So that's your fixture number. Now, any of these fields can be adjusted. So I could actually go and say, well, I actually want this fixture to be controlled by fixture number 13 instead of 3. So I can edit it, and it's now being controlled by a different fader. If I want, I can edit all of these in one go. And to do that, select all of the fixtures you need. So if I just wanted lights 1 through to 10, you could either go and click on the buttons under fixtures 1 through to 10, or again on flex, use a little bit of syntax. I'm going to go and type 1 through 10, enter, selects those lights. I can then go and hit my channel button at the top, and I can readdress all of those in one go. If I do 21, it will start them at 21 onwards. Something else that's really useful in here is the ability to change your fixtures' names. So by default, they're just going to use the name of whatever that fixture is called in the library. But you can rename it. So I could give these a very imaginative name of movers, for example. Name them whatever you want. That way, visibly on your output window or on your on-screen faders, you can see exactly what fader is controlling what light. And it'll all be labelled up nicely for you. So that's your fixture number, and that's your name of the fixture. We've then got invert and swap. You might be familiar with calling these alignment options, depending on what consoles you've used in the past. They're only going to be shown for moving lights. They are tools for moving lights only. They're going to be hidden if you don't have moving lights. First of all, invert. I can choose to invert all fixtures or a single fixture. And if I go to invert, I have these options. No invert at all, which is the default. I can invert the pan, the tilt, or both. That's really useful if you want to configure your rig to be essentially like a mirror image of each other. What you could do is if you were to invert the pan of your stage right fixtures, rather than them all panning together, the ones on the stage right would mirror. And so you could then get them panning into centre stage and then out to the wings. That's a use case for inverting. Basically means that rather than dialing your encoder wheel clockwise and then moving one direction, it reverses that. I've then got swap. I can swap the pan and tilt. The pan wheel then becomes the fixture's tilt. The tilt encoder wheel becomes the fixture's pan. And on the face of it, you might think, well, that's crazy. But it's really useful if you've got moving lights rigged on their side. Really useful if you've got fixtures rigged on their side to swap those round. Then we come to our change profiles column. That allows you to change the fixture for a different fixture in the library. Maybe you've patched the wrong one, maybe you need to make a change, maybe you've on a particular show got a different set of fixtures. You can change it for a different fixture in the library. Remember earlier, this is where we want to change the mode of an RDM fixture remotely. Well, it's exactly the same place if you want to go and change a fixture of a non-RDM fixture. So I can go and click onto a fixture, and it takes me back to my 3 columns. I can now go and find the replacement fixture in the library. Or I could just go and change that fixture's mode if I wanted to. Swap it out to a different mode or change it to a completely different fixture. Now when you do that, behind the scenes, the console is going to apply all existing programming that you've done with that light to your new replacement. So all of that programming you've done before, palettes, custom home values, recording cues, whatever it is, that all is going to be then applied to your new fixture. Okay. So it's really useful. You can go from one type of moving wash light to another, for example, and it's going to, all your existing programming is going to be able to use the new fixture. as long as, of course, your DMX address matches whatever the new one is set to. If you change from a complex fixture to a very simple fixture, which you can do, you will lose that information from your show file. So if I were to change my LED moving wash light with pan and tilt, etc., and I just change it out to a simple LED unit, well, of course, the LED unit doesn't have pan and tilt. So that pan and tilt information is lost. We don't need it anymore. We just care about colour, intensity, etc. If I then change that LED unit back to a moving light, well, as I've said, we didn't need that moving information. And so that then isn't reapplied to a replacement fixture. So if you ever think that you might need to go from a mover to a simple fixture back to a mover, well, save a copy of your show file first. Prior to swapping your fixture to a simple one, save a copy first. That way, if you do need that pan and tilt programming information, you've got it on a USB stick. So that's change profiles. Change profiles, fixture swap out, fixture morph, insert terminology here. It's all the same thing. That's where you can swap an existing fixture to a new one. And then our next column is our DMX address. So this is where we can go and edit our DMX address of a fixture in here. So I might want to go and say this fixture is actually on 201. Change that one. There we go. Changed its start address. Or alternatively, I can readdress a load of fixtures in one go. Exactly like all of the other columns that we've seen. I could actually say that we want to start these on 201 onwards. And it will readdress all of them sequentially. I'll put those back to 1. I can also change the universe in here as well. So I can go in here, click in the universe, edit the universe for those fixtures. If I just want to edit the universe, well, type the new universe in, hit enter, and then enter again. And that's just going to change the universe those fixtures are on. Now, if you're on the full-size Flex console with your nice dedicated bit of syntax, you can address your fixtures and edit the DMX address of your fixtures using a little bit of syntax. So I could go in there and say, for example, 1 through 10 at 1.201. That's saying fixtures 1 through to 10 start at universe 1, address 201. Hit enter, and that does it. If I just do 1 through 10 at 1, enter, it's just changing their address. We're not configuring the universe there. Okay, so that's how you can readdress using a bit of syntax as well if you wish to. Last column is DMX in. Okay, DMX in. That is because on other consoles running ZerOS, so solution consoles, Orb series consoles that we used to make, they have a physical DMX in XLR on the rear of the console. And so to keep show files compatible between all of the various consoles in the range, there's also a DMX in column here on the Flex range consoles. And so there we are. That is our fixture schedule. That's our fixture schedule and all of the various settings in it. Something you'll notice in our edit address, we've spoken about universe. Another button in here is unpatch. If I click on a fixture and click unpatch, I can say OK. Still in my show file, all of my programming is still there, but I'm just not outputting any data to it. Okay. I obviously now currently can't control it. It's now, fixture 10 is now hidden from me. But when I know the address that I need for that fixture, I can then go in, add it in, and there we are, my fixture's up and running and I can use it. So that's what unpatch means. Then we've got delete. So unpatch, you're just not going to be able to control it. Delete fixture, that's going to get rid of it from your show. And not only that, it's going to remove that fixture from any existing programming as well. So use that one tentatively. So delete fixture, are you sure? You can also delete fixtures by selecting them and hitting delete. So again, physically click on channel or on fader button number 10, hit delete, you'll get a pop-up. Or if we go and use a bit of syntax on the full size flex, I could go and say 1 and 2 delete. And it's going to say, are you sure you want to delete these fixtures? Essentially, it's saying anything you see in here, get ready to wave bye to it, is essentially what it's saying. And you can say yes or no. Okay, click cancel on that. To go back to showing you your full list of fixtures, hit the clear button. Exactly like when you're outside of setup, the clear button clears your selection. It does that here as well. Tap clear, it clears the current selection to show you all fixtures. As you add different lights in, you will see what we call patch groups along the bottom here. These are quick ways to select different groups of lights that the console generates for you. So if I go and edit the pan and tilt settings, for example, you're going to see a pan and tilt settings button appears for that particular fixture. And so it allows you to start to filter this a little bit quicker. Normal group syntax also works in here as well. So if I were to go to my groups, my group 2 by default is selecting my odd fixtures. If I go and say group 2 enter, it selects my odd fixtures for me. So really useful if you're on the full size flex, you can use group syntax in here if you wish to. If you've got a group on a UDK, you can use that as well. So that is useful to be aware of. So that's how we can start to select it. What we can also do is sort. We can also sort in here. So if you hold shift, your column headers can now be used to sort the list. So hold shift, I've got my shift key held right now, I can sort by fixture number, or I can sort by address, I can sort alphabetically by name, for example. You can sort that way. So just lots of different ways of managing this data. Really important if you're on the full size flex and got hundreds of different fixtures in your show. Something else to talk about is multi-part fixtures. So some fixtures have the ability to have part of it with one DMX address and another part of it with a different DMX address. So there are some moving profiles where you can have their motorized movement and all of the control configuration done from one DMX start address, and then the dimmer channel of that light from a different start address. Or going old school, you might have a dimmer with a scroller. Well, essentially that's one fixture. It's a fixture just with a colour changing element to it. And so you've got these two parts. The dimmer has an address, the colour scroller has an address. That's a multi-part fixture. What you'll probably come across more commonly, do feel free to disagree with me on that one, but what you'll probably come across more commonly when it comes to multi-part fixtures is moving wash fixtures, where you can have the LEDs addressed separately to the main unit. Let's patch an example. So if I go to add fixtures, there are loads of these fixtures available, but I'm going to go and find the Chauvet Pixis. And you'll see here, there are multiple, well, there's lots of different modes, but you can also see here there are different multi-part modes. These fixtures have various parts. So if I go and say the 41 and 80 mode and hit next, I can then address my pixels and the fixture. I can address the fixture and the pixels separately. So I can go in and say, okay, well I actually want the maybe I want the pixels of this to start at, I don't know, 401. Maybe I want the pixels on a different universe. Maybe I'm actually going to go and say I want the pixels on 2, starting at 1. So I can have the pixels on one universe, and then the fixture, the actual fixture control, maybe I'm going to have that on 301. So I can address those separately. And when I've done that, I can go ahead and click Finish to add those in. And it's added it in as one fixture, but with two parts. And you can see the part name listed in the part column, the new part column that's appeared. Again, I've got a new patch group, or a couple of new patch groups in fact. You can see now I've got a different type of fixture, so I've got a patch group for the different type of fixture. I can now filter by universe, and I can also filter by any fixtures with multiple parts as well. Something else we can do in here is we can have one fixture in my console, so one fader, outputting that data to multiple different fixtures on different addresses. And we can do that by going into a fixture and adding additional addresses. So if I go and say 201, and this time rather than hitting OK, which will just edit the address, this time I'm going to go and say add as additional. Now my fixture 10 is controlling two Aleda Wash K20s, one on 181 and the other on 201. So I'm now having two fixtures on different addresses responding to the same information. Really useful if you're touring, for example, you come to a venue and they've got extra fixtures to what you've programmed in your show. Well, just add a load of extra addresses in and all of your existing programming is then applied to these extra fixtures as well without you having to readdress those new fixtures. So that is our add as additional. And I can actually go in and add multiple additionals. I could go and say I want to add another additional address. In this case, I've just picked an address that's used by a different fixture. So actually I'm going to go and say 221. And that will add it there as another extra address. So now my fixture 10 is outputting that to three different start addresses for that particular Wash K20 fixture. Great stuff. If I click on that, unpatch, OK, it removes the extra additional address for me. So that is our fixture schedule. That is our fixture schedule. That's all of the various ways that we can manipulate our fixtures once they're in our show. And I mentioned earlier, well, we can patch across 64 universes, but how on earth do I get that data out of my console? Well, let's go and explore the routing side of things, and let's go to universes. By default, if you patch onto universe 1, for example, DMX port 1 on the rear of your console will start to output DMX. Happy days. If you patch a light onto DMX universe 1, DMX port 1 is going to start to output data from your console. And you can then plug into that DMX port to control that light. On one universe Flex S consoles, the port 1 and port 2 on the rear of Flex S consoles both output universe 1. You can plug into either. It's like having a little splitter on the rear of the console. By default on all other consoles, 2 universe Flex S consoles, any universe count of full-size Flex, port 1 outputs universe 1, port 2 outputs universe 2. But we can configure that. That's just the defaults. This can all be configured. So first of all, by default, as I said, DMX is enabled. That's good. That's good news for us. We can then, if we want to, go and enable RDM. Remember, as I said, disabled by default on the Flex, as we saw earlier with our Flex S24 console and Chauvet fixture. RDM is enabled by default. And that's our RDM settings we spoke about earlier. But then we've got these three settings here. Streaming ACN, ArtNet4, CITP. Those are three different protocols for outputting DMX over Ethernet. On the rear of the console there is an Ethernet port, a network port, physical RJ45 connector on all consoles but Flex and ZerOS server. Flex and ZerOS server have a EtherCon connector. And so you can put your console on a network and you can then start to output multiple universes over the network. And you'll start to realise, that's how I can get my universe 25 out from my console. you can start to output over Ethernet. So these are just 3 different protocols. CITP, as you can see, brackets capture, that is typically used to control your visualization software, your capture visualization software. Streaming ACN and ArtNet 4, those are just 2 different ways of outputting DMX over Ethernet. Again, there's dedicated videos on those protocols, so go and check those out. But I could go and enable the protocol I need. I can then go and configure my network IP address. You can configure the network settings on your console. Because I'm on my laptop, those are the 2 different IP addresses currently available on my laptop. And I can then start to output my desk universes over streaming ACN. When you've enabled the protocol you want to use, you can then scroll down, and this is where you can access all 64, there it is, all 64 desk universes. And you can see 1 and 2, they've got something patched onto them. And I can now go in here and configure all of those protocols. So first of all, I have Desk Universe 1, remember, that's anything here. And I've also got Desk Universe 2, remember, that is anything here. And so I can route those out of my console using these settings here. So as I can see, by default, I'm emulating a Flex. Desk Universe 1 is getting routed from port 1, DMX port 1, but it's also getting routed on Streaming ACN Universe 1, ArtNet Universe 1, CITP Universe 0. Okay. And that then changes. On Desk Universe 2, we're now outputting on port 2. If I wanted to get my console having both ports on the rear of the console, both outputting Universe 1, well, I can just add the second port to Universe 1. I can go and say, add physical port number 2. If I hit OK right now, well, I'm going to get a pop-up. It's going to say, well, currently this port is outputting Universe 2. Are you sure you also want Universe 1 to be output from this port? And I can say yes. So now I've got my pair of ports on the rear of my console. Both of them, port 1, port 2, are outputting Universe 1. For the physical DMX ports, you can then choose to decide whether you have RigSync enabled on that port. So I can have RigSync enabled globally, but I can only have RDM data on my first port, for example. Or I could have RDM data enabled on both ports. In the same way that I can have Desk Universe 1 being output from multiple DMX ports, I can have Desk Universe 1 being output across multiple streaming ACN universes. I can do the same for ArtNet, I can do the same for CITP as well. If things start to get messy, as I'm going to deliberately make it messy here, I can then go and choose to reset to defaults. And that tidies everything nicely back to defaults. A couple of things to mention. When it comes to streaming ACN universes can have a priority. That's just a number between 0 and 200. If a receiver sees there are multiple controllers on the network, it's going to listen to the one with the highest priority. Okay, and so that's really useful if you're using multiple different controllers on the same network. When it comes to ArtNet, same again, enable it, get your network settings configured. Something ArtNet has the ability for is RDM. So streaming ACN, that is just DMX over Ethernet, really, but of course with our added benefit of priority and things like that. With ArtNet, that's DMX and RDM over Ethernet. Okay, so RigSync will work over ArtNet as well. Now, I can see here, I've enabled ArtNet now, and I can now see any ArtNet devices that might be on my network. So I can see a 088 gateway 4, it shows me the IP address, and I can then go and edit that device name if I want to. That then allows me, if I've got multiple gateway 4s, I could have my stage left one. or I could have a stage right one, for example, and then in here I can see exactly what one is doing what. Now the gateway port, that has 4 physical ports on the front of it. What's getting output from those ports? Well, I can configure that remotely. So by default, I've got ArtNet 1, ArtNet 2, ArtNet 3, ArtNet 4 out of ports 1, 2, 3, 4 respectively. Okay. So therefore, what that's telling me is any fixtures on Des Universe 1 are getting routed to ArtNet Universe 1. Any devices receiving ArtNet Universe 1, so i.e. port number 1 on my gateway, will therefore output that data. I can go and configure that remotely though. I could go and say, actually, I want port 1 of my gateway to output ArtNet 10, and I've remotely configured my gateway on the network to now output a different ArtNet universe. Another really clever thing you can do with ArtNet 4 is you've got this switch. Now what this allows you to do is essentially use ArtNet purely for configuration, so for your remote configuring of gateways, and also of course your RigSync for your remote device management over Ethernet, but then use streaming ACN as the DMX over Ethernet protocol. So you can use ArtNet just for the configuration, you can use streaming ACN for the actual DMX over Ethernet. So I could go and configure this to say, actually port 1 is going to be outputting streaming ACN data, so I'd now need to go and enable streaming ACN and make sure, yep, streaming ACN is currently outputting Des Universe 1. But now I'm configuring this with ArtNet, but I'm actually using my streaming ACN data to transmit my DMX. And that is everything I wanted to go through today. So I hope you found that useful. So just as a quick recap, we've gone through RigSync. We've discussed manually patching if you don't have RDM fixtures. We've then discussed editing or configuring or customizing your fixtures in the fixture schedule. We had a quick look at MultiPart fixtures as well, for if you've got fixtures with multiple different parts that can be addressed separately. And we also then took a little bit of a dive into universes, explaining the different protocols, the different ways we can output DMX from the console, and also starting to explain about how you can configure ArtNet devices remotely from the devices section as well. And that's everything I wanted to cover. So as I said, please do go and check out the other videos that I've mentioned. They're available on the YouTube channel. Go and check them out. In particular, if you want to know more about ArtNet and streaming ACN, check out the Ethernet networking video. And equally, if you want to know about DMX and RDM, go check out the dedicated DMX and RDM session. So I hope you found this useful, and I hope it's kind of maybe made you realise how powerful your console is, especially with RigSync and also the multiple number of universes that you've got to play with. So go check it out, have a play with your console, and if any questions pop up at all, please do get in touch, drop us an email to support@zer88.com. Hope you found the session useful. We'll see you on the next one. Take care.